Hello, my name is Justin DeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about everyone's favorite monster that starts with the letter G. It is Gamera.
That's right. This week, we are the friend of all children. This week,
Gamera.
This week, they're sending us cheesy movies, the worst we can find.
So you're singing that song because Gamera, to a lot of people around our age, is mostly known as Mystery Science 3000 fodder.
That's right. Giant monster who is the poor cousin of Godzilla. Y'all like Godzilla. Who doesn't like Godzilla? Well, what if I told you that there was another parallel monster, a rip-off monster, if you will, not by Toho Studios, but by the competitor Dai?
Yeah, competitor is probably a strong word. They were a studio that did a lot of prestige productions. They did Gates of Hell. They did a bunch of Akira Kurosawa films. But even the early Gamera films are not, let us say, big budget affairs.
And most of the Gamera films were made unapologetically for children. They had lower budgets than the Godzilla films. They were, what's a nice way of saying tackier than the Godzilla films, which could get pretty tacky indeed.
Well, I mean, it's arguable at a certain point. The reason that these giant monster movies in Japan got more and more kiddified is thanks to TV shows like Ultraman that suddenly made, direct to a kid audience on their TV screens and very available. So all the studios, once they get to a certain point, are scrambling going, all right, we need to put out product that can compete with like 21-minute every week shows. Like, let's just do it cheap, put it out there and move on.
And also in the late 60s and early 70s, the Japanese film industry was experiencing an industry-wide decline. Akira Kurosawa made 2 films in the entire 1970s, for instance, because his visions, his budgets were just too enormous for what he could get. And you saw this in the monster movies in, for example, the over-reliance on stock footage in some of those 70s Godzilla movies.
But Gamera never used stock footage, ever.
No. Oh, no.
There isn't a whole movie that was the last of the classical period that is mostly stock footage.
Can I say the plug here?
Yeah, do it.
This is going to date the episode. April 16th, 2024. If you are in Toronto, come to the Fox Theatre. We are introducing the last of the classic Gamera films, 1980s Gamera Super Monster, on the big screen.
So you're going to see all your favorite scenes from all the previous Gamera films.
Yeah, we'll get to this movie a little later.
But first, let's start all the way where it all began, 1965. So Gamera was a creation of the Dai head executive, Masashi Nagata, who just had the idea for, hey, can you make something with a giant turtle? Why a turtle? There's a million stories of that. Like, everybody has their own take on it.
I mean, I love it.
Is it too goofy, in your opinion? No,
I think
that's a leading question.
I think it's just goofy enough.
Well, the thing about Gamera, for people listening to this who have never seen a Gamera film, thank you for tuning in. Your loyalty is appreciated. But he looks scary, and he's always looked scary, even in the kid movies.
I think this is a complicated thing. It threads a certain needle. He looks scary.
He has bloodshot eyes.
Yes. He looks silly.
Yes. Because he's a big turtle, and he's got big tusks.
And what does he do? He retracts into his shell, and he shoots flames out of his orifices, and he spins around, and he flies through the air. And sometimes he goes to outer space.
Oh, he goes to outer space a lot.
And then somewhere between his silliness and his scariness, there is an uncanny quality to him. As I said, these movies are a little cheaper than the Godzilla movies. The suitmation, that's what they call the special effects. Sometimes not quite as state-of-the-art as the Godzilla movies. So, like, he'll have these big eyes that sort of blink very slowly.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can tell they're trying to do, especially in the early movies. Like, a lot of the monsters that he fights glow. And their eyes blink a lot, which you can see in some Godzilla villains, but I don't usually associate that with them.
But there's a sort of paper mache quality to some of the Gamera villains. There's a rigidity to the craftsmanship of them. Sometimes they look a bit more like off the rack action figures. I say all this with affection because I love how they look.
I don't know if I would say off the rack because they look so odd.
Yes.
Like, as if someone doodled them very quickly. It's like, all right, make me a suit of this. And you're like, huh? Big knife head guy who would then become one of the most iconic kaiju villains ever.
And okay, the fact that they are children's movies, most of them, all of them, what am I saying? They're all children's movies.
Well, arguably the first two, they're closer to the early Godzilla template.
But they tap into something in the child in all of us. I mean, Gamera is quickly established in the series by the third movie as the friend of all children. He's a protector of children. There's always some little kid in tiny shorts and a baseball cap who forms a sort of psychic or emotional bond with Gamera.
Sometimes he's in the Boy Scouts and you're like, no, please leave that organization. It's an evil one.
And in terms of tapping into that like childlike side in all of us, you know, a lot of the movies, they remind you of the relationship you might have had as a child to a pet, or like Gamera is both a pet and a big brother. And in
comparison, Godzilla is more like an angry bully.
Yes,
who's
exactly.
pissed off that he has to do any of the stuff he's doing in the movies.
And even when Godzilla is a hero in like Megalon and such, he's like, not. Ugh. He keeps his distance. You don't have the kind of intimacy with him that you have with Gamera. And you mentioned the sort of anything goes designs of the creatures. I do think like, you know, if you're looking at it through adult goggles, you might say, well, this looks pretty careless and haphazard and like thrown together. And that may be true. But like if you're a kid, I can imagine a lot of these movies lighting up your imagination because, oh, it's a monster with a big knife in his head, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's one easy to understand image. And that's why you go back to it again and again.
And it's cool, like the Homer, the car that he designs on The Simpsons.
I will say, almost every monster in these Gamera movies, they have like 10 moves where you're like, oh, the knife guy can also throw ninja stars, eh? Oh, I like that.
And you know what else I like? These movies? Very violent.
Very violent.
Which you don't necessarily expect. Gamera bleeds more than Godzilla does.
Yeah, Godzilla does bleed in the goofier Jun Fukuda movies.
But Gamera, Gamera bleeds in all of them, and anytime he bleeds, I'm hooting and hollering.
It's because he's the underdog. He's always struggling in a way you don't really get the sense from Godzilla.
It's true. He's a bit of a Jackie Chan in that sense. And when he bleeds, he spews
green blood.
Yeah, just like the Ninja Turtles, you know?
So, Gamera the Giant Monster, it comes out in 1965. It's directed by Noriaki Yuasa and written by Nissan Takahashi. I mentioned these two names because other than the second one, which was directed by someone else, all of them are directed by Noriaki Yuasa and written by Nissan Takahashi.
And Yuasa, his first movie was something called If You're Happy, Clap Your Hands from 1964 that was a completely different genre than this. It was apparently a bit of a flop, and he took on this assignment to save his career, basically.
And like the Gamera movie came out about because the studio was trying to make a rat movie and they had a bunch of real rats in the studio. And I believe like fleas broke out. So they're like, we're gonna have to shut this down. We're gonna have to do something else. What do you got? Giant turtle? All right, let's go. Pure black and white Godzilla ripoff. It's shameless in the way that you watch the first Gamera film and you see Gamera within like a minute, like bursting out of ice. There's no like, let's build up to the monster. Let's create a sense of awe. No, we're giving the audience exactly what they want.
Right. It has a bit of the chilly tone of the first Ishiro Honda Godzilla movie, but it doesn't have the same moral weight.
No,
it doesn't have the same
absolutely
seriousness.
not.
But I mean, I love the first Gamera the Invincible. I love when these movies are in color for obvious reasons, but the stark black and whiteness of the first one,
it's great.
You know, the widescreen of it.
You don't get many kaiju films in black and white other than like Godzilla, Varan as well, because I believe it was like a TV production at some point or a lower budget one. And then you have this Gamera and like beautiful widescreen. Love it.
It looks spectacular. And, you know, even though these are Japanese B movies, because it's a Japanese studio film and they had a studio system in terms of technical proficiency like on par with Hollywood, you know, it just like even the B movies of the time look spectacular.
And then right after, Gamera's a hit. Oh, we're going to make another one, which was a pretty big budget film, Gamera versus Baragon. But the director was pushed aside because he had went over budget with the first Gamera. And it's hilarious that he was pushed aside from directing this film, but he stayed on as the special effects director. So Noriaki Yuasa, from interviews, you get the sense that like he enjoyed making these movies. Now, did he enjoy making them as the budget got slash and slash? No, but he's trying his best. And unlike the Ishiro Honda films, Noriaki would direct a special effects sequence. So he would do the main stuff with the humans and then also do the special effects stuff, usually that's done in studio. And so Gamera versus Baragon, I think it's fun. I think it's a little lead-footed compared to like the ones that would come after that. They haven't gotten into the kid, this will be the POV of, these monster movies yet.
And he's a hero in this one, though.
He is, and he fights an amazing villain, Barugon, who I love because he can shoot a rainbow laser out of his back, and he just looks like a Popeye dinosaur with a horn.
But I think you will agree that the series really becomes itself in Gamera versus Gaios.
Absolutely.
The third in the series, which really hits the sweet spot. It's still like the budget is still such that every frame is a painting. And I really mean this. I'm not kidding. Like, you look at this movie, much of it takes place in this like mining town around a volcano. And so they're sort of saving on cityscape sets for a lot of it. But the intricate detail of all these like rural locations, these rural like models is like so beautiful. The lighting with like the bright primary colors, the costumes, much like the Godzilla movies where there's this like tactile like beauty to the rubber. But then the moment where it really becomes itself is there's a little boy in the movie.
Yeah, a little, some would say, annoying boy.
Yeah, the Kenny. That's what they used to call them on Mystery Science Theater. They would call them all Kennys because one of them was called Kenny.
So I should say I have no nostalgia for Gamera. Didn't watch him when I was a kid. Didn't even watch him when I was a teenager. Only watched these movies in college.
Wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, I genuinely enjoy these. So if people are coming into the perspective of they're waxing like, oh, back in the day when I was a child and Gamera was my hero. Nope, none of that. I'm coming to these as an adult and just wafting in them, going, what beautiful motion pictures.
Well, I first discovered them, I had seen a lot of the Godzilla movies, and these Gamera movies were assumed public domain in the West because they were
Japanese.
Yeah, and like some company had bought, I think AIP had bought them for TV mostly.
Yep.
And whatever shell corporation owned them went out of business or
and
something.
AIP didn't care. They're like, whatever.
So they would circulate on public domain DVDs, and I would see them in like really cheap pan and scan image that didn't do justice to the full beauty of them. And then I remember seeing them all again when I was in college too, when Shout Factory started putting them out on DVD, and just sort of like taking in the beauty of them, the junky beauty of it.
So like Gamera, the first one, was the only one to get a theatrical release in that like Godzilla style. They cut it down, added scenes of people in boardrooms explaining what's going on.
Which, I mean, I do not get this. Like Brian Donlevy stars in it, which can you imagine? Like they're like, oh, we got to get a American star to be in this. We can't get Raymond Burr. Well, how about Brian Donlevy? That'll get asses in seats.
What kids love is when you just stop the movie down cold and you just have them like explain things.
It says so much about how deeply embedded like the racism was, where it's like you need to have a white guy in this movie, even if it's distracting from the monster, even if it's even more boring than the Japanese human footage.
I'll reiterate, when we saw on the big screen Godzilla versus King Kong, the American cut, I had forgotten how dreadful those human scenes are. Like
they stall the momentum just as the story's kind of getting going. It cuts back to that smug newscaster.
And like kids just ate it up too. Like they loved it. And you know what? People distributing the movies learned no lessons from it because they're like, oh, kids love this, right? This is what they want. Someone pointing to a picture of a dinosaur and going like, this is what Godzilla probably evolved from. It's like, boo!
Godzilla has a brain about this size holding a marble. He's pure brute force. But Kong, he's a thinking animal.
The American animal, he's a thinker, but the other one.
But anyway, Gamera versus Gaios, the scene where the series becomes itself is when the little boy rides on Gamera's back.
Yeah, so Gamera consciously saves a little boy. So this gigantic monster cares about the little people, these ants beneath him, and puts them on his back.
He's a regular Free Willy,
Yeah.
And much like in Free Willy, it's that relationship between this boy and this great beast. It's a nonverbal relationship.
Gamera never talks.
I don't think he does in any of these movies. Godzilla talks once.
Yes.
And hopefully he will again at some point.
I love it. And he'd be like, I'm proud of you, Will. And you're like, oh, thank you, Godzilla.
But no, much like, a boy and his dog or a boy and his whale or whatever. And just that scene where he's flying on Gamera's back. In some of these movies, there are scenes where kids are flying on his back and the triumphant music is playing. Gamera, Gamera. But no, in this, it's like just a nocturnal ride through the sky.
It's like, ooh.
Around the volcano. Yeah. And I don't know, it's one of those movies. You're watching a movie that you sort of think is like a little bit junky and a little bit tacky, maybe. And then you're all of a sudden hit by a scene where it's like, no, this is This is affecting me. This is tapping into something very primal.
So let's jump to Gamera versus Gyron from 1969.
Low-key my favorite of the series.
Now, is this because of MST3K plays?
It is a good episode. So this is the one that if you were going to make the case for these movies as so bad they're good, this is the one you would show. Because the plot of Gamera versus Gyron
Rules?
yes. I by the way, my thumb is up on it. I think it's a
You're
great
not
film.
watching it being like,
No.
look how bad it is.
But, it starts as these movies often do. Some kids, some latchkey kids, biking around looking for adventure.
Godzilla's revenge, if you will.
Yeah, and they get, abducted by these alien space babes.
Oh, they don't just get abducted. They just find a spaceship, and the Japanese kid and an American kid, I believe, get into the spaceship and are like, all right, let's go. Something that you should say about these kids in this movie, they have the most deadpan, almost like Wes Anderson reactions to everything they see. Like, they go up into space, and a meteorite's about to hit them, and Gamera zooms in and knocks it away, and they're like, hey, Gamera, yeah, go get that meteorite, save us, thank you. And it's like, wait, but like, do you see Gamera every day, kids? Like,
but at this point, you're 4 movies in. Gamera has kind of become part of the furniture in Japan, hasn't he?
And you expect Gamera to save you if you go flying up into space.
But you may be wondering, where did these space babes come from? Well, they are on another planet in our solar system that happens to be located exactly on the opposite side of the sun of us. So we could never see it.
And wow, this wonderful futuristic space planet that has only 2 people who live there.
Yeah, and they're going to eat the kids' brains.
Yes, they appear nice at first, and they get really close to cutting into that kid's skull in this movie.
And Gaios is their mascot, and this has, I think, some of my favorite fight scenes of the series.
Well, Gaios is, talk about brutality. He's introduced fighting.
Sorry, I said Gaios a minute ago. I meant Guiron.
How dare you?
I know. I'm so ashamed.
So Guiron in this movie, big knife-headed guy. Guillermo del Toro ripped him off for a monster in Pacific Rim because he is one of the most iconic monsters. Introduced coming out and fighting Gaios, the bat-like creature from the previous film. And they just painted him silver and they were like, it's Space Gaios. Love it. Very funny. And what our favorite knife-headed giant monster does in this film is brutally murder Space Gaios. Cuts his wings off, cuts the other wing off, cuts his screaming head off. Also laughs, which you don't see giant monsters do. He's like,
yeah, that's what I love about this as a children's movie. I actually think that they really understood, what children are. Like children are very silly and they like silly things, but then there's an evil side to children.
Yes, like a cruel side.
There are children who love to just like tear their Barbie dolls apart, and this movie captures that.
And what ends up happening is Gamera comes and saves the day, and almost like in every Gamera film, almost like the spaghetti western structure, Gamera gets his butt kicked and then the kids are like, Gamera, please help us. Finally, Gamera comes back to life and saves the day, fighting in that big futuristic robot city.
I think the fact that Gamera is a turtle, just in addition to being cool and funny, is important to his character because he is an underdog. You see a giant flying turtle.
Yeah.
Like, what are turtles? They're the slowest creatures, for God's sake.
And like in the original films, they had Gamera always walking on all fours to separate him from Godzilla, which puts him in an even lower position as a fighter against all these other monsters.
So, even though he's a giant monster, he is a bit of an underdog. He's a damn turtle.
Yeah, I mean, he must not be getting any sleep looking at those bloodshot eyes of his.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one, very fun, very like a kid describing you what their favorite Gamera movie would be. This is the film.
And then they go to outer space, and the space ladies want to eat their brains, and there's space Gaios, but he got decapitated.
And at the end, they come back to space, and the whole town is there, and the parents are like, well, we should have believed you, and well, we made a mistake. And the little kid stands up and goes, we need to make sure that there's peace on Earth and less traffic accidents.
Yes, the traffic accident thing he keeps bringing up over and over and over again.
Yeah, a real scourge.
So from this point on, the series, it's a slow decline.
Yeah.
Virus, Jiger, all those movies, you see more and more stock footage. Look, all these movies are good. I like all of them.
What, are you gonna spit in the face of cool giant monster action even though it is stock footage? I say nay.
I do think it's funny when they start recycling stock footage from the first movie and it's in black and white and they have to find ways around.
Well, even in the one we just talked about, there's a scene where the kid's like, and now let me catalog Gamera's adventures up until now, and then you just see all of them.
Now, Gamera, a super monster, so Dai Studios went out of business in 1974, and then 6 years later, they came back with Gamera Super Monster, which is
There's no new special effects footage in it. Yeah.
No. Well, there's some new scenes
superhero ripoff footage, yes, but no new Gamera footage in it.
Yeah, but you get all the good Gamera footage. And I actually really love, like, no, I'm not just saying this because I'm playing it at a theater next week. Like, I think this movie is like a sugar rush.
We had whatever pick of the Gamera films that we wanted, and we picked Gamera Super Monster consciously.
Exactly, because this movie it's got everything, you know?
So Gamera, he had a long run. A lot of movies came out, die out of business, comes back to just like poke Gamera's corpse a little bit, see if a few more a few flames come out of him. What do you even say? Gamera rules in these early Showa films because his power is to shoot flame, and it's real flame that comes out of his mouth.
Yes.
Which was a big issue, especially when he was flying and there was like a blue flame came out of him as his jetpack because it would light the cables on fire and cause the gigantic thing to go crashing to the ground.
So then for 25 years, Gamera hibernated. But then in 1995, inspired by the success of the revived Godzilla series.
And at this point, the Godzilla team were kind of folding things up because Godzilla vs. Destroyer, the one where Godzilla dies, came out in 1995.
But those Godzilla movies, the revived series with, as the VHS box said, 90s high-tech special effects.
That means Godzilla and the monster will be standing across from each other and shooting energy beams at each other. That's it. No physical contact.
Yeah, that's right. They were very popular at the Japanese box office, which led to a revival of the Gamera series with a trilogy of films between 1995 and 1999. Again, not as expensive as the corresponding Godzilla series.
No, and a big difference is that those 80s and 90s Godzilla films are pretty big goof 'em ups. Some of them are serious, like Godzilla vs. Destroyer, but they are also like, we know what we're doing. Like the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah one has those big King Ghidorah puppets that are like, look, we're really cute, and things like that.
So at this point, the Gamera series in the popular imagination it's a joke, basically. But a filmmaker named Shisuke Kaneko and the writer Kazunori Ito revived the series with 3 basically straight ahead
giant monster movies.
Yeah. And not super serious, but serious enough.
Yeah.
Taking it seriously.
Have you looked into the career of Shisuke Kaneko? Because I feel that is a filmmaker more exploring to do. He started doing early Pink films.
I would like to know more about him because, of course, he made these movies that caught everyone off guard, and then he made the best of the 2000s Godzilla
movies. Yeah. And he's a real jack of all trades. He gets a really affable picture in Norman, England. We've talked about this before, behind the Kaiju curtain, where there was a guy that just was on these sets of the Gamera films and the Godzilla film that Shisuke Kaneko made. And you get the sense that Kaneko is a huge fan of he loves making these movies. So you really get that. There is no kind of looking down on it. He said that he originally was going to approach it as, maybe I'll do a comedic version of it because that's what people know. But then he's like, all right, let's shake it up. Let's do something different. You also get special effects from Shinji Higuchi, who co-directed the special effects on Shin Godzilla. He directed Ultraman, Hideaki Anno written and produced one. So all these special effects are tip top.
And the idea is to basically do an Ishiro Honda Godzilla movie, but for Gamera.
But Gamera's not the villain in these movies.
Well, yes, again, he's
or is he by the third one?
He's basically the hero. He's basically the friend of all children. Tonally, they're more similar to the Honda movies. But I think also, crucially, there is a correspondence between this series and the old series in terms of Gamera's characterization. You know what I mean?
Underdog, if you will.
Yeah.
That he's big, he's mean, but he's also constantly being beaten by the monsters that he's fighting.
And he forms a sort of psychic bond with Steven Seagal's daughter.
Yes, which I don't think she would like to be called that. Let me find her name. Ayako Fujitani, who gets a psychic link with Gamera, which is a classic giant monster thing. Even the new, Hollywood MonsterVerse movies have that feature in them.
We both watched Gamera 2, Attack of Legion, which takes place a year after Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, sees Japan sort of rebuilding itself after the attack of that film. And one thing I like about this series of movies is they basically, again, they take the premise seriously, where you're sort of seeing okay, what happens in the city? What are the levels of government? What are a
Shin Godzilla, if you will.
Yeah. What does it actually mean to have Gamera and his associates tear apart your city?
And this one, I think it's probably the weaker one in my eyes, and that's not large gaps compared to the first one, which has the novelty of whoa, Gamera's serious. And the third one, which is really interesting because that one is about how does like a survivor of one of these Gamera attacks, like her parents died in the attack, so Gamera is a villain, and like what if she could connect with a monster that could then take Gamera down?
Well, in this film, the second one, the titular Legion is this.
I love how they call it Legion because it's like little monsters that like are going all over the place, and you see a soldier go like, Legion, and then he quotes the famous Bible verse, but then everybody is just calling it Legion, so I guess they all got the same idea at the same time.
Gamera is up against this swarm. The movie, I think, does a pretty deft job interweaving the monster drama with the human drama, showing how the different like levels of characters in government are interacting with this menace. Like, it's not reinventing the wheel exactly.
No,
it's just, like, what it's doing is just offering like a very good like disaster movie like plot.
That you have like, you know, the general, then you have under that. I do think you lose some of the characters. Like, you're like, oh, where'd the main character we were following at the beginning go? Oh, there she is, like 30 minutes later.
Yeah.
But the monster stuff in this is so good. There's a
my
sequence where like Gamera's like holding the monster back so like it won't attack the helicopter, and it's just like, it's being cut open by, okay, we mentioned that Legion is like little monsters. There's also a giant monster as well.
Of course.
That Gamera has to fight, and just like holding the helicopter back as he's being beaten up, and like the characters are like, oh, Gamera's just trying to protect us, and like Godzilla doesn't do, because Godzilla's mean, like he would never protect a human. So it's so much fun to see like, you know, a giant monster fairly serious within this context, and after that sequence you get the amazing scene of Gamera trying to like stop the giant flower from exploding, and he doesn't make it in time, and he like blows up in the process. So good. Love all that stuff.
The fact that a city basically gets nuked in this movie too, which I don't think you would see in an original Gamera movie.
No.
You know, adds a certain like emotional stakes to it.
And so like this trilogy, usually when people talk about like kaiju film, they say go watch the, you know, 90s Gamera film. It got a lot of play. I remember when I was a kid, on the back of comic books they had that like painted cover of like Gamera, Guardian of the Universe, on everything, and I was like, what is this? Like, he looks so mean. And I didn't see the movie, of course, until after high school. But yeah, these movies, like, if you haven't seen them, go and like check them out. If you're like, oh, I don't like, you know, those kiddie Gamera films, I'm sorry that you don't have more joy in your life, but maybe you'll enjoy these.
These are just like good straight ahead examples of the genre done well.
Which you don't get that much, because thinking about it yesterday, there's not that many kaiju series. Like, if you think about it, like Godzilla, Gamera, Daimajin, like, you know, the big stone monster guy, but like those movies were made in like a 2-year period. Mothra got 3 movies.
The Rebirth of Mothra, yeah. Well, Gamera went into hibernation again, and he returned in 2006 with an attempt to restart the franchise, Gamera the Brave, an unapologetically kid-oriented entry in the franchise.
Yeah, so it's interesting that after the like 3 serious ones, the studio went, all right, we need to make, like, we can't sell these 90s Gamera films to children. Can we try to, you know, this property that people know, and kidify it, like what it used to be known for? So
what I knew about this movie was that it was for kids, that it flopped at the box office, and I knew that the director, Ryuta Tasaki, when you look at his filmography, no disrespect to him, it's all
Super Sentai stuff.
It's all, kaiju superhero stuff that you've never heard of. And, you know, B-level stuff. And I thought, this is probably not going to be very good. There was a huge disparity between my expectation and what I got, because I actually think this is like maybe one of the best kaiju movies I've seen.
I absolutely agree with you. Isn't it crazy?
Thank you.
Yeah. When I saw it too, and I only watched it because it was on the Arrow UK set, one of the greatest box sets of all time, and because you know the 90s films, and then this one comes out, and I think that's what hurt it, right? Where it's like Gamera, he's got a redesign, he looks cuter than he ever has, he's got big eyes, he's still got like the horns and everything, that you're like, well, I don't need to see this. But it's like, oh, what if you saw a kaiju film that understood what it meant to be a child that loves kaiju movies?
Yeah, I think this movie is actually almost like a perfect midpoint between the goofier 60s ones and the 90s trilogy. It takes the premise seriously, but it is very much from the perspective of a child, and if you open your heart to it, it will work on you like it works on a child.
I forgot that like it starts with a really moving scene of like an old Gamera committing suicide to take down monsters.
Yes.
And like he looks old too. It's like 1973, and it's the father of the son that's like like witnessing it happen, which then like influences this classic Amblin style setup of like a dad and a son. The mother passed away and the son is trying to get over it. You know what I really enjoyed about this movie is that like there's no bullies or human villains. It's all about like friendship and that they're just friends and getting through this.
Yes. So it's this little boy in this seaside town without a mother, and he has this little pet turtle. And this turtle, much like Seymour Krelboyne's plant, just
starts
growing and growing and growing until he literally becomes Gamera. And much of the film is about the boy coming to terms with the fact that his little turtle, now big turtle, Toro.
Yeah, Toto, sorry.
Cannot stay with him forever. And in fact, Toto has a much bigger purpose. And there's also, Toto has to come realize that he's Gamera.
Yeah.
And one of the ways they do that, shamelessly, is they give Toto gigantic Bambi eyes, which I'm sorry, I am a human being. I responded to that very strongly.
You know, one scene that when it was happening in the movie, I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, it's an understanding of what these movies are. Is like Gamera, aka Toto, is fighting the giant, shaggy looking
great monster.
Yeah. And they need to get him like an energy, basically an energy pellet to him.
Oh my God, yes.
And what ends up happening is that like all the kids just like give it to each other in a relay race. And like the kids don't know each other, but they just understand that like Gamera needs this.
God, I'm getting goosebumps. Or the scene where like Gamera, Toto is like stuck in the side of the building, and his little friend comes in and like
to give him that pellet.
Yeah.
But he stops and he's like, you can't die. You have to keep going.
And I mean, ultimately, like, it's a story about like a boy and his dog, and it's a story about like two boys like growing up and learning to let go.
Yeah.
And like
it's great.
What can I tell you? It's very moving.
Yeah.
I did not expect this movie to be so moving. And also as a monster movie, it's
great.
It's full of like really fun monster action.
Yeah, and it's like a mixture of, they weren't at the point yet where it's all CG stuff. So there's some like CG melding of things, but like all the buildings that they get crash into, they're all like practical.
And you know, the fact that Gamera in this movie, like you see the folds in the rubber suit.
Yeah.
Like I love that.
Love that.
Yeah.
Why don't they bring, like, it's good.
We all
People
love that. Yeah.
Like all the CG stuff, you know, I have a smile on my face, but I would like it like 1,000% more if it was guys in suits fighting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Gamera the Brave, if you look at Letterboxd, like everyone who watches it is like, oh yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Like, it's one that
it just came announced as this is a second-rate movie for children.
And like the cover is just like the kid and like Gamera's face, and Gamera looks like cutesy. So you're like, no thank you. But yeah, very good. Again, every movie we talked about, we're like, you should see these movies because they're good. If you have a 10-year-old, wow, the kid will love this movie. Put on the English dub. Like, it's just great.
Yeah. So Gamera, yours to discover.
Yeah, so Gamera, but after that, like, Gamera the Brave, again, they're like, we don't know what to do. There was like a little 5-minute short film with CG Gamera that came out. That was directed by the guy who did The Taste of Tea, because it was like 50th anniversary. There's a Netflix show that's animated, to which I say, no thank. Get those. It's like done with like that stiff CG animation too. Ugly. Don't like it. No thank you. I have no doubt there will be a live action Gamera film that's going to come post all this Godzilla, like, you know.
Shin Gamera?
Yeah, Shin Gamera or something like that, because I mean, if they're not going to strike now while the iron is this hot, like, they're never going to do it. So it's going to happen, 100%. I do want to mention, before I forget, that if you want to watch these movies, Arrow Films put out a Blu-ray set. Now, I don't want to tease people, because the one I'm talking about is not available right now.
It's out of print.
But you can still get them in, like, the Showa box set, and there's a Heisei box set as well. That'll cover all the movies. But boy, this... Like, if you see it, I don't know, at a garage sale or floating online, it comes with a big book that explains every movie. I was talking to Will earlier, and I said, hey, Will, did you know there's a giant map in this? And he was like, wait, what? No. Because I just discovered it this week looking through it. Yeah, this is the respect that these movies deserve, which, you know, for the longest time, were just in the bargain bin. But now you can go and watch them in beautifully remastered versions.
The worst of these movies just has impeccable craftsmanship.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, when, you know, they come, they're believed to be in public domain, and they get shown all the time, they are automatically devalued because, oh, it's so available. If they were really good, like, would they be so watchable?
And yeah, the fact that it was Japanese too, you know. The thing too is you watch Gamera versus Gaios, which any like American audience would have been like, trained to think, oh, this is cheesy. It's like guys in suits and stuff.
Oh, look, you can see you can see Tonka on the side of the car.
Which you can't.
You cannot.
But it's like a lot of people have a sort of built-in assumption that good special effects equals realistic special effects. And by that standard, most of the big blockbusters right now would not meet that.
No. Can you look at it and say, hey, that's fake?
Yeah.
Yes. So
like what matters with special effects is, does it create a reality, and do you buy into that reality? And these Gamera movies do. The best of them, at least.
I've heard from a lot of people as kids these days that like kids still love like Ultraman, Gamera, Godzilla. There's something there that like no other media will give them, like the giants. Basically like a giant toy set come to life that the CGI movies don't do because of that uncanny reality. We have not figured out how to get by yet.
I mean, these Gamera movies, like if you're a kid, there's this like relationship between the small and the huge, you know, they're like these tiny little boys, and they're like, you know, they're intimate relationships with these like massive monsters.
And I should say something interesting about the 90s Gamera films is that all those classic ones, it's all little boys, but the 90s one is all about women and their relationship with Gamera. So you can get like best of both worlds. I would not show a 10-year-old maybe the 90s Gamera film. Do you think they're too scary?
You know, I think if I were 10, I'd like them.
Yeah, probably. So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Michael, and he goes, "Hey, Justin and Will, making my way through all your Kevin Smith episodes in the back catalog. Whew, that'll take you a few weeks."
That would be in our Patreon. We keep talking about Kevin Smith.
Yep. And the letter continues, "The sworn duty of all ICC listeners who are also Jersey natives." I say it's a sworn duty of all ICC listeners.
Amen.
Your episode about the Kevin Smith extended universe unlocked a memory for me. On the first weekend after getting my driver's license, a few friends and I piled into a car and made the ultimate pilgrimage of all devotees to the Viewisk universe. We're talking the Quick Stop, the record shop and diner from Chasing Amy, the funeral home from Randall and Dante are chased from, the Catholic Church in the finale of Dogma, and finally, Kevin Smith's own comic book shop, Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash, Red Bank, New Jersey.
Be sure to hit up the Smod Castle, too.
Where I picked up a signed DVD copy of Dogma. Oh man, speaking of Dogma, aren't you excited that Kevin Smith made that announcement? Dogma's coming back.
He made that announcement on April 1st, though.
Do you think it was a joke? I don't think so.
It's not very funny if it's a joke.
I mean, we've seen Dogma. I'm not very funny either.
While we're talking about Kevin Smith, I can't wait for his new movie, The 4:30 Show, or whatever that is.
We are blood packed to talk about every new Kevin Smith film, so we will be seeing it.
Man, that on our Patreon, we talked about his unreleased horror film, Kilroy Was Here.
Yes.
Or unreleased. It was released as an NFT.
Escaped.
Yeah. Wow.
It's not going to get worse than that.
I don't know how you can be able to project something and have it not be better.
Can it be worse than that, like Halloween?
Halloween.
We also discussed.
Oh my God.
Sorry, I brought it back.
No.
Well, the letter continues. "This was truly a spiritual day for our Mazda full of 17-year-old boys. What's your relationship with actual filming spots for movies that are meaningful to you? Have you ever made a trip to somewhere because you saw it on film? Does being in a location from a beloved movie motion picture do anything for your soul or your relationship to that movie? Please keep up the great work, shining a spotlight on those inheriting Kevin Smith's DIY filmmaking legacy, like Matt Farley, Charlie Roxburgh, Terry Chu, Avalon Fast, and the guy who made Teddy Bomb and Impossible Horror. Best, Michael."
Have you visited any filming locations?
I have not. Not really. I've never... Did me and my friends in high school go, maybe we could visit New Jersey in the Kevin Smith location? The thing about the Kevin Smith locations, though, is that like they are so intrinsically about him. Like the Quick Stop, he worked at that Quick Stop, right? It's not like a location where he filmed the Quick Stop. And I think that would have more value for me if I was visiting. Did we, when we went to the Mahoning Drive-In, look and go, could we visit the Quick Stop?
We thought about it.
We thought it. Too far.
Too far for what it was.
Yeah.
But
Have you visited any locations?
I went to the theater where Robert De Niro took Sybil Shepherd in Taxi Driver, which is now, of course, like a Broadway theater for children. You know?
Oh, but it still has the seats and stuff like that?
I mean,
not really.
I think I just looked at the lobby. I
Okay.
mean, you know, it's like completely remodeled.
See, that's the issue, right? Is that if I'm going to go somewhere that's like in a movie, it needs to look like it did in the movie. Otherwise, I'm spiritually in the same place. It's not the same.
There are things I would like to see, I guess, but not that many. I mean, so many movies shot in LA that maybe if I were in LA, I would go see things. There are landmarks that I would like to see that aren't necessarily filming locations per se. Well, actually, next time I'm in LA, I would definitely like to go to the house where Bela Lugosi comes out in Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Is it the same house? They haven't rebuilt it or anything?
It's still there.
Wow.
And in fact,
see that I would want to go see.
In fact, I believe, by Gold Diggers, the bar in the alley behind.
Yeah, someone invited us when we were in LA, and me and Emily just didn't have time. That it's a recording studio now.
Well, can I just say, if they're listening, if I go to LA eventually, which I'm sure I will,
you will visit.
I would like to see the filming location of Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Mm-hmm. Well, spiritually, I don't think they have a shrine and it's still like a little studio or anything like that.
Have you visited any graves, like any celebrity graves?
No. Oh, Bruce Lee. And that was secret because Emily and her mom brought me to the grave when we visited Seattle.
That's really cool.
She's like, I know you'd like that. It was Bruce Lee beside Brandon Lee. They're both there at the same place. Have you never visited Bruce Lee's grave?
I've never been to Seattle.
Oh.
I'd love to.
And other than that, not even in Toronto, I've never been I want to go to the movie locations. And I always see sometimes people are like, oh, there's the church that's in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness or stuff like that.
Do you want to, there are some things, it's more like in retrospect where I was in the St. Lawrence Market not long ago and I remembered, oh yeah, this is where Steven Seagal directs Traffic in Exit Wounds.
Oh, but you visit there regularly though.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's the thing. It's like being in the city. It's like if I'm on the University of Toronto St. George campus, I'm aware that Black Christmas was shot there, but I also don't really care because it's just,
you
it's
walk
just
around
my city.
Yeah, it's downtown.
What
You've
can
been
I
there
say?
a million times. Is there other than the Ed Wood location, is there anywhere you would like to visit? I'm trying to think.
I would like to go to the Chaplin Studio in LA too.
What does that look like now?
I think the Muppets have it. It's like the Muppet Studio.
Oh, wow. I mean, I do love the Muppets.
Yeah.
I don't know about the new Muppets, but yeah, I love the idea of the Muppets.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are other ones. Would you like to go with me to see George Romero's grave sometime?
I would like to go. Where is it?
It's in Toronto.
So wait, is it close to where I used to live? Because there's a gigantic cemetery there.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't think it's there. I think it's more in the West End. But I should look into this.
We should go visit.
Yeah.
They already have a plot for Guillermo del Toro right beside him for filmmakers that come to Toronto and end up living there.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you see that list recently? Guillermo del Toro was like, oh, my favorite places in Toronto.
Yeah, I did see that.
Bay Street was not on that list, and that disgusted me.
Yeah, maybe he's going to all these places for the first time. Maybe he just hasn't been there yet.
But, if people have locations that they feel we need to visit, knowing what we enjoy, let us know. Oh, I would have liked to visit the big water tank that doesn't exist anymore at Toho Studios where they shot all the Godzilla stuff.
Yeah.
They destroyed it after Godzilla Final Wars.
There are probably some places in Hong Kong, like the Police Story Mall. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. I don't know what shape it's in now, though.
I'm sure it's completely different.
Yeah.
But I would look at the atrium and say,
there's a Chungking Mansion.
Yeah, I would love to go to the Chungking Mansions. That'd be pretty fun.
Well, thank you very much for that letter. And again, let us know where we should visit or where you visited and felt a sense of awe. You can do that in the Discord.
Let's go to Monument Valley.
Yeah, and we're like, that's where John Ford sat and refused to answer any of Peter Bogdanovich's questions.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I don't know. Yeah. Who cares? All right, our next letter goes, Tom Hanks from Tim. He goes, hey guys, I was recently listening to an episode of the Laser Blast Film Society, and Justin said, if you don't like Tom Hanks, then you are either a monster or have no soul. What do you think of Will's hatred for Tom Hanks? Will hates Tom Hanks and everything that he represents. I understand that. I don't have a deep love for Tom Hanks either.
Listen, Tom Hanks, he's talented. What do you want?
He's lame.
He's lame.
Not cool.
He's not cool.
Yes, that's right.
No, and I would also just say, and I'm not going to go off on a rant about this.
I'm sure there's many episodes of your other podcast where you do that.
Yeah, it's like if
what movie set you off?
I mean, it's got to be Forrest Gump.
Oh, really? You have that much vitriol for Forrest Gump?
No. You know what it was? It was saving Mr. Banks.
That movie fucking stinks.
Okay, and just the three movies we named right now. Yeah. This is what he's devoted his life to.
Hey, he was in Cloud Atlas. I'll give him that. That's a weird movie. Cloud
Atlas was a swing.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but the ones that I like if you ask me my favorite Tom Hanks movie, I'd probably say The Burbs.
Yeah, I would agree. I love him in The Burbs, especially that he's it's against his image and deconstructing it in a way only Joe Dante could do. You wish he took more chances as an actor, especially that he has that much power.
Yeah.
And, if you've heard him on interviews, I think we maybe brought it up when he was on Paul Giamatti's podcast. Did you listen to that? It was very fun. He sounds really interesting.
He has like a snide sense of humor sometimes.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I like his weird obsession with collecting typewriters. Did you know that?
Yeah, there are weird sides to him.
But why isn't he weirder in his movies?
I know. I would like to see him lean into that more. Have you seen the paparazzi video of him yelling at paparazzi?
No.
So there's this video of him and his wife leaving somewhere, and some paparazzo accosts his wife or something, and he starts yelling at them, and it's that I want to see more.
Yeah, that angry Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
I mean, you love The Post, though, right? Your favorite Tom Hanks performance.
I mean, journalism will save us. What can I say?
The story about the people who didn't publish the story. Anyway, I respect Will's eternal hatred for Tom Hanks.
Look, here's the thing. You complain about Tom Hanks, it's like pissing in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's very funny, the idea of you oh man, did you hear this episode? Will and Luke roast Forrest Gump. Maybe it's a satirical take on the original novel.
Yeah.
Right? No. You guys should read the Forrest Gump sequel. It was published in novel form where Forrest is in the back of OJ's
is that true?
Yep, 100%.
Oh, wow. That sounds kind of good, actually.
So, if people
And
disagree...
in Forrest Gump 3, he starts planting all these little mechanical doohickeys around the World Trade Center. This cushy government job that he's got.
Wait, where am I on a certain date in January on Capitol Hill? Whoa! He's the one who let them in. He's like, I'm just looking for the bathroom.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we're writing Forrest Gump 3 right here.
All right, so that's it for letters. But remember, April 16th, Fox Theater, Gamera on the big screen.
Super Monster, the superest of monsters.
You're going to get all the best Gamera footage. And you'll be able to meet us if you want.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll be selling stuff as we tend to do at these events.
Yeah.
But you know what? What a low price to pay for an experience you will never forget.
That's right. $5, we watch you jack off. $10, you watch us jack off.
Don't say that, because I don't want people coming up to us and saying that. See, there's a fine line that things that you're laughing about and then doing them in real life, not funny. Not funny. So, what are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
Well, you can't talk about Gamera without also talking about Godzilla.
Godzilla!
And there's a new Godzilla movie in theaters, the second in 5 months.
Yep, it is Godzilla Kong, the New Empire. Boy, I should know
something
the title
like
of
that.
this.
Yeah.
Yes. Who cares? Godzilla and Kong are in it. Me and Will, we went to go see it on the big screens. That's what we're talking about on Patreon this week. Next week, how about we get a little bit indulgent? Because Gamera's not indulgent enough, right, Will?
This episode is one that I'm really looking forward to. We are going to be talking about the city of Toronto, where we both live, the city that made us.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about the people, the places, the institutions.
All around cinema, though. Our memories of cinema.
The things that made us what we are today. Will we be talking about Greg Woods?
Absolutely.
The creator of the Eclectic Screening Room. Yes, we will.
If you're like, what is that? Well, you have not lived in Toronto when we were there, because he was a big deal.
And he still is, if you ask me. So, you'll get names like that. We are going to let you enter a world.
Yes. A world that, if you want to go read some of those things, they're out there, but you're going to want to listen early, right when the episode drops, because if you want to go find some of the things we're going to be talking about, there may not be that many out still.
That's right.
So that's what we'll be doing next week. And until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening.
Well, first of all, we just want to give a big shout out to friend of the show, Dan Erdman, who sent us a wonderful book that he's just written that everybody should get.
Yeah, it's part of the Global Exploitation Cinemas line, and it's called Let's Go Stag, a history of pornographic film from the invention of cinema to 1970.
That's right. So before Deep Throat,
before porno chic.
Back when it was just black and white 8mm stuff of guys, in masks and stuff, an exhaustive study of that sort of thing, and very well written and beautiful.
Thank you very much for sending us the book, Dan. I now lent it over to him, and he's going to dig in. And what if it opens a world that you're like, oh God, I got to see all of these movies now? I know you're kind of into it already because Something Weird has done loop collections and things like that.
Yeah, the problem with old pornographic loops is, frankly, they don't have a story.
No, they don't. But I'm looking here, and chapters like the stag scene in the debut of 16mm film, 1923 to the Second World War.
Listen, if he can point me to the Edgar G. Ulmer of stag movies, I'll be interested.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you very much is there a stag movie episode in our future?
If you can show me the good ones.
Yeah.
Maybe.
This is like, I don't know, the Battleship Potemkin of stag movies.
Yeah, I would be curious about that.
So from stag movies, we now move on to an event me and you witness. Also, the thing that prompted us to pick the subject for next week, because we were sitting in the lobby of a University of Toronto building.
That's right.
And we were looking around. A movie event was about to start, and we were like, "Oh, where are all the movie guys that we know that we've seen around?"
Like, where's Greg Woods?
Where's Jonathan Culp?
Jonathan Culp.
Yes.
You know, those names may not mean anything to you, but they mean a lot to us.
Mm-hmm. Also, it prompted me to say that because we looked around when I first arrived, and I went, "We are the oldest people here.
Oh my God.
We have turned into those people."
I'm 35. It's
Yes.
ridiculous. So we went to see Jonathan Rosenbaum.
Yep, that's right. J-Ro.
The God.
He came down. He had a talk advertising basically his new book. Very disappointed. Had a wallet full of money, ready to buy it and get him to sign it, but wasn't selling any.
No.
Because he doesn't care about monetary gain. He's just there to spread the love of cinema that's very specific to what he has talked about in the past.
That's right. So in May or June, there's going to be a new book called In Dreams Begin Responsibilities, a Jonathan Rosenbaum reader.
We expect every listener of this to be buying that book.
Oh yeah, day one purchase. But he was there reading an essay from the book, one of his classic reviews of Spielberg's AI.
I think we discussed that exact essay when we did an episode about him.
And then a Q&A. And Jonathan Rosenbaum is in his 80s now. And I say that because, and I'm saying this with all the affection in the world, all the love in the world. When you're in your 80s, you're not necessarily creating new ideas.
It was basically like Leonard Skinner, right? Like
Yeah.
if you went to go see them now, or any classic rock band.
Well, it's just like all the things that you've heard Jonathan Rosenbaum say, he said again.
Oh,
and
but I'm just waiting for him to say it. A big smile on my face.
I was in heaven. Tell me about the lunch you had with Orson Welles.
Oh, he almost missed that one though. He
I know.
zoomed and he got it right near the end.
When we were like, how long until he mentions his time in Paris?
Yes, and someone behind us, we had talked about him, like, I hope he mentions this, and they saw me and Will nod at each other and they laughed, and Will was like, oh, we can't.
I was like, I can't look at Jessica
'Cause you're
anymore.
gonna laugh, yeah.
'Cause I'm gonna laugh. It's not that he's saying anything funny. It's
No.
just,
It's just
that,
like
it's just that it's the hits.
it's the hits.
All of them.
Did he mention Jacques Tati? Yes. Yeah, he did.
Did he mention his correspondence, his unpleasant correspondence with Truffaut? Yes.
Yes. I mean, I love hearing all these stories. There was young people. Again, once everybody was there, we weren't the oldest. Phew.
Yeah.
But
Thank you, Adam Naiman, for coming.
yeah.
For being like 3 years older
man
than
laughing
me.
behind us. And me and Will nodding at each other.
Yeah.
But can I just say as well that something that made me feel old was when I sat down in this classroom, I felt like Jerry Lewis, like doing shtick. I could not get the chair to sit straight. And you saw me, I was like, oh, like it kept going
Well,
back.
in fairness, the chairs, they were like attached to the desk. And
Yeah, but they
you pulled
bent
them
back.
Out. Yeah, it was like totally like the opening scene of Cracking Up.
Like people seeing us, like, look at these old men who have never been in a university classroom. Like, whoa, I don't know.
No,
and I kept looking around and being like, how are people not like leaning back all the way? And everybody was sitting straight. And I think I had a broken one when I got up and I looked afterwards.
Back in my day, I not only have I been in university classrooms, I was there back when they had normal chairs that worked, chairs that you pulled out, you sat in, and then you pushed them back in when you were done.
That's it.
Yeah.
And they hurt when you sat in them,
Yes.
too. Something that I love about Jonathan Rosenbaum during this talk. So there were a few nuggets of new information that the guy who was moderating the Q&A had been Jonathan Rosenbaum's student. Will is smiling, knowing what I'm about to say. And the opening anecdote he said is that when he took Jonathan Rosenbaum's class, J-Ro at the end of the first day said, does anybody live in this section of town? And the guy raised his hand who was moderating the Q&A. And J-Ro went, can I get a ride to school in the morning?
Right.
That rules.
And then I kept imagining him being like, whoa, dinner sure would be nice. And, ooh, are you going to finish that?
Yeah. Hey, you throw the bone in the soup and you got yourself a stew going.
Yeah. But then he also what was his story like? He was telling J-Ro about the Don Siegel movie.
Yeah, Brannigan.
He was saying, I think Brannigan's kind of an underrated Don Siegel. And then, by the way, the guy who told the story, if you're listening, I'm not making fun of you.
No,
I
we're not
promise.
making fun of you.
But the next week he picks up Jonathan Rosenbaum again because I guess he'd been roped into picking him up and dropping him off now every week.
Yeah.
As I would be too.
If J-Ro said hey, can I get I'd be like, yes, please.
Because what am I going to do? Say no to the great man?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do anything you want. Anything.
I just want half your sandwich.
But yeah, he picks up J-Ro next week. He was like, yeah, so I watched Bran again.
Terrible.
Not very good. And
well, there's a capper to that story though, and the guy moderating the Q&A said that like he liked that because that showed J-Ro was curious. That like if someone said, "Oh, I really like this thing," and
could have been a lowly student, could have been anyone.
And that rule, I'm like that too. If someone tells me a movie that I love this, and I'm like, well, I got to see this, not because like, oh, I need to prove that like it's good or not, but like it's something new. I want to explore this.
Yeah, so that's great. A man like Jonathan Rosenbaum doing that. But then the punchline is he'd actually just watched Brannigan again a third time 2 days before.
Yeah, and he's like, it's still not very good. And I want to be like, J-Ro, you're the best. You can do whatever you want. Why are you watching Brannigan again?
We got to get this man some new hobbies.
Yes, please. There was some other information that he shared. For example, an anecdote I had not heard was that he had written a film screenplay based on a J.G. Ballard story. He didn't say which one. I'm sure if I went looking, he probably mentioned it before.
He had some awesome humble brags in that one where he was like, oh yeah, I showed it to Susan Sontag and she said, oh, I'd really like to direct that. Nothing came of it. But or when he was like, Paris, it's a really small community in a way. You meet everyone. Like, for example, the first person to read my script was Jean Seberg, and she really liked it. And I knew it wasn't very good, but she thought it was great. I thought, okay, I've never heard a humble brag like that. Well, Jean Seberg liked my script, but she was wrong. It was kind of bad.
I love it. I mean, the man is in his 80s.
He's a god.
Rules.
Yeah.
One thing I do have to disagree with J-Ro about, though, I could see where he was coming from, was somebody asked a question about like criticism today, and it ended up J-Ro saying something along the lines of, I think it's better now that critics are not paid because they have no bias. So what they're writing about, they're passionate about.
They're a hobbyist.
Yeah, they're a hobbyist. And so there is no direction that there's expected from their writing. I would counter argue, I think you should pay critics that are doing writing like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would like to see is fully automated luxury communism where like people
can do whatever they want.
Yes, everyone can be hobbyists, and they can also like have the space to be a hobbyist.
That you're not under the weight of capitalism. I was tempted to ask him about Letterboxd. I'm sure he knows what it is, right?
I think he's on Letterboxd.
Oh, is he officially?
Well,
not Jonathan Rosenbaum.
No, I think he does have a Letterboxd page, and I don't think he updates it much, but he has a blurb for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood there that's a little hard to penetrate if you haven't been reading him for 50 years.
Godardian, if you will, in its critical.
Like, I know what he's saying, but others might not.
Mm-hmm. But on that topic, I did enjoy what he discussed. Like, when I used to work for the Chicago Reader and I had to review a movie every week, like, my job was, I need to make this seem like the most important film that there ever was this week. Next week, forget that movie. I'm talking about this movie.
Right.
And so I understand where he's coming from. It's just that, like, yeah, but if you could actually, people could pay their bills doing what they love to do, then...
Yeah. I stumbled on his capsule review, which was like a year before he retired, of Spider-Man 3. And, I thought, why did they make him see that?
What was his capsule review like?
He didn't like it.
No, of course. He doesn't like that kind of stuff.
No.
But maybe that's a fun perspective, though, that he's like a J-Ro is forced to see Spider-Man 3 and then write about it in that way, as opposed to writing it in a way where you don't want to offend anyone.
Yeah.
If you just want to kind of hit the middle line.
He used to write a lot, especially in Movie Wars, about how, like, when you're a daily newspaper critic, you get fed into a machine of publicity, basically, where, like, your schedule is dictated by the Hollywood studios. And so, like, 1 week, if Jurassic Park opens, because the studios have dictated that that's the big movie that week, you therefore have to treat that like it's the big movie that week, even if what he actually wants to talk about is Histoire du Cinema or something.
I did find it very sad how he talked about, like, you work and you have a career and you want to move up to the other level, and eventually you have to realize, I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, he talked about how he hasn't really been published in the Times, or
the one time he did, it was a bad experience. And he said that one of his biggest evolutions was becoming not just comfortable but happy with being a cult critic, basically. Kind of like us.
Yeah, that's right. The J-Ro of the podcasting scene.
We're also getting comfortable with being only middlingly successful.
I would like to go to the level above that. Thank you very much. But I very much enjoyed...
Again, paying your bills would be nice.
It would be very nice.
Yeah.
But, it was nice to see J-Ro. Still answering questions. Still, the fact that he watched Brannigan a few days ago. Like,
hope he watches it again, just to be sure.
After that talk, he's like, maybe I wasn't 100% right about that.